Welcome to B2B Marketers on a Mission, a podcast for change makers where we question the conventional, debunk marketing myths, provide actionable tips, think differently, disrupt industries, and take your marketing to a new level. From improving your campaigns to making you a better marketer, these are the inspirational stories that will help us change the way we think and approach B2B marketing one conversation at a time. This podcast is brought to you by Untitled Consulting, helping you to stand out in the market and drive revenue to your B2B business. And now your host, Christian Klepp.
All right. Welcome everyone to this episode of B2B Marketers on a Mission. This is a show where we help you to question the conventional, think differently, disrupt your industry, and take your marketing to new heights. This is your host, Christian Klepp, and today I'm joined by someone on a mission to help SaaS founders fix stagnating revenue. So coming to us from Javea, Spain, Mr. Ton Dobbe. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Perfect introduction.
Pleasure to have you on the show, Ton. And, this is we've been planning this for quite a while now, I believe. And I think congratulations are in order because at the time of the recording, I think Spain won the UEFA Cup. So there's probably a bit of partying going on your side of the world. No?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I was sad that the Dutch got kicked out by the UK.
Yeah.
And then I was actually quite happy that Spain won against the UK.
Yes.
You know, you never win when you're in a country where you're Dutch and actually Spanish in the same way.
Absolutely. So for one bad thing that happened, there's also a good thing that happened as a result of it. No? You can look at it that way. But look, I'm really looking forward to this conversation because we are going to dive into some really interesting topics today. So let's start off like this, okay? Because I understand that according to your LinkedIn profile, you don't have the magic formula, big surprise, to help B2B businesses, especially SaaS, to grow. But what I do know is that you've made it your mission to help them stand out and create exponential leverage. So for this conversation, let's focus on the following topic. And it's something that you're very passionate about. How B2B SaaS can become more remarkable and discover their hidden values. So I'm going to kick off this conversation with two questions, and I'm happy to repeat them. Question one is define what you mean by more remarkable. And number two is why do you believe many B2B SaaS companies fall flat when it comes to, being more remarkable?
Yeah, these are indeed questions to my heart. First of all, the definition of remarkable, it's actually quite simple. It's worth making a remark about. And I mean, I've been in the software industry for a couple of decades now, as you can see from my gray hair. And initially, I was always sort of intimidated by all our large competitors that had budgets that were 10x the size that we had, millions, sometimes, hundreds of millions of budget. And I think when it comes to being remarkable, it doesn't allow that, or it doesn't need that. Everybody can be remarkable because it's about the small daily things that you do. So if a software company becomes worth making a remark about, then you're doing something right. And that can be incorporated into everything you do. And as a consequence of that, you'll be noticed in the marketplace. People start talking about you, and then you start to run a completely different type of business. And then your second question, right? I would say the first thing, and actually I'm already connecting it to a number of the traits that I wrote about in my book, but it's wanting to please too many people. This notion that, okay, we have to have a very large market, a very large TAM, total addressable market, and it needs to grow big numbers and so on. And everybody is going after that because in a number of cases, people say, we want to have a valuation that is millions or actually billions in a short number of time. We want to be the next unicorn. Where they forget that in order to become a unicorn, you first have to sell your first customer, and then your second, and then your third. And these are, in the smaller markets, the niches, whereby, especially in the beginning, you're far better off with the scope that you have to start impressing those type of customers and then grow from there. Then, instantly going after a market that is way too big for you. So that's the first one, wanting to please too many. The other thing is, that's already maybe in connection to what I just said, obsessing over competition, not following your own path. And you cannot outcompete the world. You cannot outcompete your direct competitors or any alternative that your customer is looking for. So that's, I would almost say, a waste of time. Not that you should be not following what your competitors are doing, but you should be learning from it and draw your own path, and being okay that certain parts of the market are theirs, because then other parts of the market, they can be yours. And then the last one, and that is kind of the thing that get me so passionate about being remarkable, is the alternative of that, or the contra of that, is good enough. And that results in too many mediocre products. I mean, I think it already starts with this notion of what people call an MVP, a minimum viable product, where people are just thinking, okay, what is the bare minimum we can put to market for people to start to say something about it? I'd rather say, okay, if you start like that, of course you need to start with something, but make it at least minimum remarkable. Minimum sellable, people sometimes say. So something that people are actually willing to pay something for. In the heat of the competition, in the issues that are in the marketplace, the short-termism that sometimes arises, very very many companies are opting for, okay, if it's good enough, let's go for it. And I think that's where they go wrong.
Absolutely. No, those are some really great points. And I wanted to go back to something you said earlier. And it reminds me of that expression that the riches are in the niches, or in the niches, depending on where you are. But my follow-up question to that is, why do you think a lot of companies, and I don't think this is unique to SaaS, but a lot of companies don't niche down? They want to just try to, like, everybody is our customer. Everybody that is a potential subscriber, right?
It's fear of missing out. I mean, I do a lot of repositioning projects, and at some point you get to the discussion, okay, who you're really for and who you're not for anymore. And people always think, okay, well, we're not for companies that are in manufacturing or in financial services because we don't have any companies there. Now, that's not what it's really all about, you know? You focus on a certain market where your ideal customers are, and you try to make it as specific as possible. And that's where people don't dare to like you said, to niche down, because they think, okay, we might be missing out on something. Whereby it's actually the opposite. You know, if you're fishing in this wide market, I wrote a long blog about it, an essay. When people are doing the segmentation, the niching as they call it, and they decide where they're going to focus, what they typically do is define the firmographics and the demographics of their audience, and both at the company and at the persona level. It's typically how big they are, what industry they're in, what region they're in, all the things that you can almost Google or find on LinkedIn. What they don't do is what I call psychographics, and that's where the magic happens. So I wrote this long-form blog where I compared it to, okay, a lot of companies, their segmentation looks like a glass of water. You know, it has something in it, and when you drink it, it's tasteless. Whereby the ideal segmentation is what I would call your favorite cocktail, because then you start to pinch in a snippet, a sniff of the dynamics that make your customers unique, and the risks that they tolerate or not tolerate, and a little bit of a sniff of what they value, and another sniff of what they aspire to achieve. And once you start doing that, it starts to get flavor. It starts to become something that both these customers recognize, because, hey, that's us, and we talk the same language. And once you kind of achieve it at that level, where a customer, when they go to your website and you describe exactly those type of specifics, when you then meet them, conversations go like yes and rather than yes but. And I think that is where the magic happens.
Absolutely. I love that analogy, by the way, your favorite cocktail. I would just caution that maybe you shouldn't have too many cocktails, no? Like
you only need one, right?
Yeah, only one. One.
Not too many niches.
That's right. Not too many cocktails, right? Fantastic. So you spoke a bit about mistakes and why some of these SaaS companies fall flat when it comes to being remarkable. But what are some other say, pitfalls that some of these companies should be avoiding?
If I turn it around and I go to what makes companies remarkable, so what to strive for, then the opposite, of course, is what are the pitfalls.
Yes.
So the first one in my book is remarkable software companies acknowledge they cannot please everyone. So the opposite of that is they try to please everyone and they go wide and they target everybody. And the pitfall there is that messaging blurs, gets too generic, and at the end you don't stand out. Second thing is, the second trait is remarkable software companies offer something valuable and desirable. And it's the combination of those two that is super important, because only valuable is only so good. But desirability is where you create urgency, there's criticality to it, there is desire, like the word says. It's something that they want. Too many companies out there offer something and think that the customer will get what they're offering and have to do the translation themselves. So they stay at a level whereby they're actually promising the same as 20 or 30 other companies, even in different type of categories and industries. I mean, I've seen CRM vendors promising the same as ERP vendors, promising the same as procurement vendors, promising the same as, and the list can go on. Because they all go for this big, bold thing, we help you grow your revenue, for example. Well, sure.
Really?
Really, exactly. Then the third thing is about remarkable software companies aim to be different, not just better. And that's also one of these pitfalls and it connects again to being obsessed with your competitors, but it also exists in isolation, that companies just say, okay, I don't like what they're doing, we're going to build the same and we're going to make this better and this better and this better, which can initially, of course, be something that could be tempting to a potential customer. But depending a little bit where you are, and my expertise in this is in the sales-led SaaS business, where investments are 20,000 a year, 50,000 a year, 100,000 a year, $1 million a year, then you have to realize that if a customer is going to move from one solution to the other solution, it needs to be significantly better. So your 5 or 10% in incremental better is not going to cut it. So that's where it needs to be fundamentally better, or and that's what I would call different. So that's a pitfall. I can go through all 10 if you want.
I mean, those are really good, and I think those would suffice for the time being. We'll save the good stuff for later on in the conversation.
Okay.
But no, those are absolutely like great points, and I would even say this whole notion of offering something of value, and I want to know your take on it, because more often than not, I've seen companies that are doing more of an inside out rather than an outside in approach. And what I mean by that is like they're trying to send something out into the world that they say, oh, definitely this is going to be of value to the target audience. But what they don't realize is that maybe the target audience doesn't actually need this at all. Right?
Yeah,
so
true.
How often have you seen, okay, download the ultimate checklist, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, plenty. Maybe actually, I might have one on my website that I still need to rename.
Maybe the 30
somewhere from 2018.
Exactly, or the 37 or the 37 tips or the 5 steps to go to market and so on and so forth. Right, and keep going.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, fantastic.
There is no, like I said, there is no sort of golden nugget. And you phrase it, the magic formula. But there's definitely a number of things that you can challenge yourself on. And that's why I created these traits, because that's something that you can, if you answer the questions around that, the right questions, you can say, okay, we're actually now scoring a 6 maybe. And that's where in order for us to get to a 10, to the full score, that requires us to do X. And you can constantly keep raising the bar. And I think that's important, because a framework is just a framework and a template is just a template, and it gets you maybe something quickly done, but it's always average and doesn't stand out. To the point to the 3 traits that I just discussed, it's actually that is wrapped in what I call the foundation. It's your value foundation. A lot of companies and that's also a pitfall that I haven't even mentioned, they keep fighting the symptoms of their problems. And they don't realize that they might not have an operational problem where the symptoms typically are being dealt with, but that they have a fundamental problem. So I recently came across a story just to illustrate that a pretty large software company, I think we all know them, was complaining to one of my peers, and they hired her for doing some pipeline advice and helping to to fix the pipeline problem, which is typically a symptom of that they were feeling. The pipeline wasn't good enough. They actually felt also that a number of their best sales were getting so desperate or frustrated that they left. And then they said, well, we got it all under control because we hired a headhunter, and these headhunter is finding new people for us, better salespeople, to replace them. Of course, also meaning that they are paying 20, 30, 40K for headhunter fees. Not realizing that it's throwing one fire out and then putting the other on. Whereby if they would make 2 steps back and realize, wait a minute, what we have here is not a problem that is in our sales operation. It is something that is more fundamental. It's around who we are for and who we're not for. It's around what our value proposition is really about, uniquely for them, something that customers really want, but they cannot easily get somewhere else. And the positioning of that, of course. And that's, like to your point also about inside out versus outside in, very hard to see from the inside because you're just living the day-to-day and you're in a rat race. And people are calling you and pushing you, and your manager is on top of you. And so the only thing you can do is actually make sure that the metrics that you see are going to improve.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So there are occasions where I like to refer to that sometimes as the internal high five, right?
Yeah.
You run it past everybody internally and they think it's great and high five and fantastic. And then you launch it. Doesn't generate the results that you were expecting. And then everybody's does I call it the Spanish Inquisition. Yeah. Why did it happen? Okay. Yes. Maybe the accused must enter the room now.
I've never thought about that one.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, it has to do with a number of things, of course. That's what I see with virtually all the customers that come to me.
Yeah.
And you cannot blame companies for it, The larger you grow, the bigger the invisibilities actually become. And these invisibilities, I categorize them into 3. It's either complacency. We start to tell ourselves stories that we actually start believing. We're so great. And that dip that we had last quarter, that wasn't because of an issue we have in sales. It was just a couple of customers that postponed. There was a hiccup with a product and so on. So it's never the fault of us. The other thing is what I call blind spots. And the last one, of course, is bias. And the larger you grow, the bigger these become. And the only way to get around it is to acknowledge it and to find ways for people to unblindfold you. So it's,
exactly. So we coined a new phrase today, unblindfold, right? But
exactly.
Speaking of invisible, that was such a great segue into the next question because I believe you mentioned this in the previous conversation. You talked about how many companies don't grow because of things that are invisible to them, right? So can you elaborate on that a bit more?
Well, I mean, to give you an anecdote, recently I had a customer coming to me. It's a resource planning tool. It's been around for over 15 years, I guess, in the Netherlands. Selling international to pretty large organizations. And the reason why these people come to me is not because their product is mediocre. Actually, it's a pretty good product. It's not because their people are stupid, The CEO is an ex-McKinsey, is an ex, means be working for the Big Five. And, has been capable of running the company profitably for a good number of years. It's also not because the processes are not in place, because they have, pretty sophisticated processes. So it's not about that at all. It's just simply because they don't see anymore what makes them unique. And when he came to me, he said, we actually started doubting our own product. Like, is it still as good as we think it is, because they were growing and then it was stagnating, and at some point it even started almost to decline, and they had customers churning, and that's where these struggles internally come. You know, people start pointing at each other. People have to do overwork. I mean, just not the right atmosphere. So he realized, okay, pretty hands-on guy. Normally he does all the things himself because that's, or at least with the team, because they got capable people, and he decided, okay, maybe for this one we shouldn't. So then we did a pressure cooker project, and in four weeks we solved the whole thing. And out of them came that nothing was wrong with the product. Their fans were raving about the product as it is today. It was just about clarifying where they have their ads these days. And I call it who you're for and who you're not for, but actually being very clear who you're not for. Being honest and open to yourself about a number of customers that you might have in your customer portfolio that maybe would have been better off going to the competition. You know, it's not that they are not good customers because they pay the bills and all of that, but you could almost feel from the starting point that they will never become fans. And I think too many companies out there take customers knowing it will likely never become a fan, still do it. And what that does to organizations, it just drags everything down. To kind of elaborate a little bit on that, if a customer is coming to you and you have to sort of bribe them already with a discount. So they buy, they don't see the difference between you and the competition, but if you drop the price enough, they buy from you. And at least they have something that's the cheapest. These customers, first of all, you already drop your margin on that level because they don't see where your real value is. They're going to use your functionality to just fix a couple of their products or problems in a way that they think you can. So they're going to use your product in a way it was not designed. So the implementation is going to be stressful. It's going to go out of budget, overrun, and these type of things. Then customer success comes. They cannot get the customer happy in the normal time. Then they're going to make R&D life miserable by asking for features that no one else is asking for, but they need them. And it seems to be that this is normal. Like every other solution has them. So what you end up is that you need far more people to support those type of customers. You are going to be thrown off track. So you're going to release products that might fix some of the problems, but no one is going to ever thank you for it because it should have been there in the first place. And it's just a vicious cycle down. And the only way to break it is to kind of pause and say, okay, hey, we need to be honest with ourselves. These are the customers that always become our fans, and these are the qualities that these guys have. That's what we're going to focus on. And then things turn around.
Fantastic, fantastic. So what I'm hearing you say, and this is all great stuff, what I'm hearing you say in the past couple of minutes is that the company has to really do, for lack of a better description, like a deep dive or some soul searching into what is the reason for being, not necessarily just of the company, but what are we producing this product for, right?
Yeah.
Who is this serving? Does this really address the genuine challenges and pain points that this customer has? And will this help them to succeed? Will this be transformational for them or not? Right?
Yeah, I would like to actually go a little bit further. In my book, I'm writing about a triangle, and someone called it at some point the broken triangle because it's often broken. If you look at a triangle, it is strongest when all three legs, I would almost say four legs, all three legs are equally in size. That's where it is strongest. So what does that mean? It's three fundamental questions. What I'm always going through with my customers to get to do that soul searching, particularly on the pain point side, is to create a long list of 50, 60, 70 pain points that keep their customers up at night, that keeps their ideal customers up at night, because that's a very, very important nuance to it, because some of these problems, they might bother, and other people might have, but they don't bother about them. Once you've done that list of problem definition and then define them in a way that when you hear them and you own them, it gets itchy. That's where they're at the right level, because a lot of times problem definition is done very ill in a very generic way. and it doesn't help it either. Then you answer 3 questions. On a scale of 1 to 10, how valuable is this to solve? On a scale of 1 to 10, how critical is it to solve? And then a very important question in terms of why you. On a scale of 1 to 10, what is your ability to exceed expectations? So the first 2, valuable and critical, they are really important because if it's valuable but not critical, it's a nice to have. And that is a disaster. You don't want that. If it's critical, not valuable, then they deal with it. They don't do anything either. So you want to have both because then it's high on their agenda. And ideally, this problem should also be high on the agenda of the CEO because often we talk about projects. So it's very important, very valuable and critical for the project or the domain, for example, around HR. But it might not be as important to the company as well. Like it's not keeping the CEO up at night. So that's an important thing as well. So that's two legs of the triangle, both high. And then what you're looking for in your soul searching is, okay, let's be honest now. On which of the problems can we exceed expectations? If you can solve it, that's where a lot of companies make the mistake. If you solve it, you score a 5 because there's many others that can solve it. But where do you score an 8 or a 9 or a 10? And that's what I want to have the argumentation behind it. Because in that list that suddenly then drops from 70 to about 10, that's where your magic happens. I call it the magic concepts. That's where you can find what's the deep differentiated advantage that you have, that you can then start, because you know the problem, to translate into unique value. But that requires a lot of soul searching. And often what I see is that we do a first round of validating, and then I start challenging. First of all, you see across the company that different people rate it in a different way, where you see, hey, they're not aligned here. So I'm always looking for the outsiders. But what you also typically see is that the lower part of the organization actually got it pretty well right because they are dealing with the day-to-day hassle, and top management thinks way too positive about where they're at their strength. And that is an aha moment. It's always refreshing. Yeah.
Yes. I suppose it depends on who you're talking to, right? In terms of like it being refreshing. But yeah, I can totally see that unfolding.
Exactly.
I know you've given us a lot of tips here, and one of the big highlights of this show is leaving something that's actionable for the listeners. So if somebody is listening to us, having this conversation here about making SaaS companies remarkable, and they want to take away something from the show, like 3 to 5 things that they can act upon, what would those things be, in your opinion?
Well, I mean, I would always start on the foundational side because that's the most valuable part to start with. I can say, I mean, you can start with trait number 10, which is about, how do you think about things and how you can hit the right nerve. But it will always be easier if you got your foundation right. So on the foundational level, start having discussions internally about who you're for and who you're not for. And actually be prepared to put it on your website. Describe on your website, this product creates most value if you're like this. And if it doesn't create that level of value if you're like that. What it does is 2 things. First of all, it will make your ideal customers see that they recognize themselves. But once you start describing the customers that are not such a good fit, they're also going to kind of take notice of that and say, wait a minute, that's also how I feel about that. Or, yeah, it's good that you're against that. So you stand for something. And this is really a tough one because, like I said, people fear of missing out. But as my illustration, the moment you get super clear on that, it works like a magnet for the right customers, and you credibly detract customers that are not going to be a good fit. That's fine. To give you an example, to make that practical, very often imagine you got 2 organizations. They are in the professional service industry. They are both 1,000 people in number of employees. They're both in the UK. They sell to the government. So on the outside of the building and on the demographics or firmographics, they're actually identical. So that could be something that you're going after. I found, almost every time when I'm looking at my customers at that picture, that's where we end up. Okay, so this is what it is. And then we find that they are on the inside, they're radically different. Because one is, for example, going after speed, where another one goes after and cares more about quality. Radically different things. One goes for compliance, and they want everything to be compliant, where the other one is more about, competitive advantage. So in describing those type of things, you don't dismiss the others that they're stupid, but you just acknowledge that, okay, if you're only here for checking a compliance box, you shouldn't be with us. There's plenty of solutions out there that does the compliance. We do as well, but you're not going to get happy from us. And I think that's where the honesty needs to start playing. Yeah, and then from there, once you got that, then go work on trait number 2, which is, really start defining what value that you create that is actually extremely desirable for your customers. And then the last trait that you can start to think about, okay, how can you actually be fundamentally different versus incrementally better from competition? And what is it required from your organization? What needs to be true? I think that's a good question that opens a lot of ideas. Because a lot of people always say, that's impossible, but it's not. And I think it's in the combination of the 3 that you'll find the answers. At least that's where I always find the answer in.
Fantastic. Okay, so just let me quickly recap that for the benefit of the audience. So start on the foundational level, right? So having those discussions internally. Number 2 is start defining what value you create that is desirable for the customer. And the third one, I hope I captured this correctly, what makes you fundamentally different versus incrementally better?
Exactly. The first one is part of the foundation, but it's about who you're for and who you're not for.
Absolutely.
So that's really about looking at your customers with an honest face.
Right. Not always easy to do at times, I would say, right?
No.
Yeah.
No. It's like I said, it's especially because of that complacency and the blind spots and the blur,
yes.
and the bias, you get blur.
Absolutely.
And for a lot of people, it's like every customer that's paying is a good customer, but it's not.
Right. Yes. I think we all know that from experience that sometimes isn't the truth, right? Or sometimes isn't the case,
no.
Right?
Exactly.
Absolutely.
To give you an illustration of that, I'm not sure how we're doing time-wise.
No, we're good. Keep going.
I came from the ERP world, like I said. And once at some point we repositioned, and I was starting to do some work with the Benelux, like the Belgium and the Netherlands region where I was living at that point in time. And I started working with those teams to make it part of the DNA of sales. They picked it up, and other regions didn't pick it up automatically, at least not by free will, so to say, because they have always done it their own way. What we saw is that selling the same product to the same industries, with the same functional scope, to similar type of organizations, in the Benelux, we started to get to raise the win rates from 20% to 80%, where in others it's stuck at 20 and sometimes even dropped to 15 or to 10%. So, explain that, right? The other thing was also that not only did their win rate increase to 80%, they were also selling faster, like months were cut off the normal sales cycles because of the perfect fit, and the word discount disappeared. And a good anecdote around that one is that our competitors, and these were Oracle and Microsoft and SAP, very often at some point in time, after a couple of months, when they realized that we were in, they qualified out because they realized we have no business here. It's one of those again.
Interesting.
So that's how powerful it can be, and it's the same organization. That was so powerful to me to see the difference.
Yeah,
because it is something that you have to believe in.
Yeah. Well, you have to believe in it. You have to substantiate it, of course, and you have to act upon it, right? And I think that's
exactly.
That's at least one of my takeaways of the things that you've been talking about in these past 30 minutes or so. Ton, I believe like throughout this conversation, you have already been in your soapbox, and I would like to kindly ask you to stay up there a little bit longer.
Okay.
Here comes the question. So specifically on this topic that we've been discussing today, okay? What is the status quo that you passionately disagree with, and why?
Yeah, I mean, I got a number.
Just pick one.
If I think about it, and I think it's actually grown recently. It's this whole notion of at scale. I mean, I have nothing against scale. I think it's a good, companies have to scale. But I think what scale needs to be about is creating leverage about the things that really work, that are remarkable and that work. Because once you got that, that's where you can drive scale about it. What it's misused for, and there's so many solutions out there these days that if you look on our website, it says personalization of email at scale and 50 different varieties of that. That means we don't believe in ourselves, but now we can spam the hell out of people wherever they are, and at some point, some people will stick. If it's 1%, perfect. If it's 0.5%, also good. I think we're going completely the wrong way there, because it's the opposite of being remarkable. It's actually being irritatable, and I don't like to see that at all. So that's my soapbox there.
Yep. No, 110% agree with that. And I think there was another guest on the show who I interviewed probably 2 years ago now, 2 or 3 years ago. And he posted something on LinkedIn which really drives this point home of this whole mass emailing or email blasting or whatever you want to call it. And, everybody's trying to sell that as like you're trying to reach people at scale and try to do outreach at scale. And perhaps maybe you'll get 3 people that are interested and you're pissing off everybody else.
True. And the stupid thing is, that's another, that's kind of like I'm extending the soapbox.
Yes.
I mean, the bulk of my customers are sales-led SaaS companies. So they sell to mid-market and enterprise.
Right.
For them to have a good year, they're often, if they close 30 new deals, 50 new deals, sometimes maybe 100 new deals, depending a little bit about where they are in the market, they get a fantastic year. Going back to that notion of, okay, if you can get to a close rate of 60%, 70%, 80%, then you only need, for 30 customers, you need 40 leads. Why would you go after them at scale? And still they do.
Yeah.
Because marketing has to kind of go out and they have to find leads. And anyway.
That just does not make any sense at all.
No.
But yeah.
Exactly.
All right. So here comes the bonus question. So some of the listeners might not know this, but you're originally from Holland and you're now residing in Spain. And so the bonus question is, what is your favorite place to go to in Spain and what makes it so special?
Well, I mean, I would say the town where I live.
Okay.
It's a small town called Gabia. And I'm maybe not doing myself a favor because now more people will come to Gabia. But it's one of those little pearls. It's in a microclimate on the east coast of Spain between Alicante and Valencia. Yeah, I think Instagram has already spoiled it because a couple of the beaches are in the top 10 of Spain. But in the summer, it's not too hot. In Celsius, that's my thing. It's 32 at the moment, whereby in other parts of Spain where everybody's going at the moment, Madrid and Seville, it's 30, 42, 50, 45. And in winter, it's also pretty mild. So it's like San Diego. The differences are not too bad. So that's one. And I think every time I speak to people from outside of Spain, the first thing they say, I love Spain, I love to go to Madrid, I love to go to Barcelona. Until people have actually been to, for example, a city like Valencia. And then they say, okay, I was wrong. Because this is something that feels, it's a city, but it feels like a village. And it's the pedestrian area, it's just a vibe there.
Yeah.
And the atmosphere is fantastic. So that's one of my cities that I favor the most.
Wow. You're really selling it, man, because I have bought in. I am totally sold. No,
Yeah,
fantastic.
exactly.
I can imagine. I went to Spain many, many years ago, and I'm sorry, it was very cliche. We went to Barcelona, yes, but in my defense, we also went to other towns around Barcelona, so we could see the Catalan countryside, and that was truly amazing. And yes, to your point, we were there in December, and it was 20 degrees Celsius, so
Exactly.
sunny, blue sky, very pleasant weather. So yeah, it was a very, very memorable experience. But indeed, I would love to talk about sunny Spain and sunsets and beaches for another 3 hours. But in the interest of time, I would like to thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your expertise and experience with the audience. Please, a quick introduction to yourself and how SaaS founders or anyone interested out there can get in touch with you.
Oh, okay. Well, that's. I mean, if you're not bored with me already, if you want to know more about me, I think the best way to kind of connect with me is on LinkedIn. I don't think there's a lot of Ton Dobbes, but find me there. My website, valueinspiration.com. This is where you can download my book and a great number of other kind of goodies that I have for free there. But just say hi and let's have a conversation.
Fantastic. Ton, once again, thank you so much for your time. Take care, stay safe, and talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Okay.
It was a pleasure.
Bye for now.